At some point in your life, love will change you. The question is whether you'll notice it happen. We've spent centuries writing about love in poetry, in philosophy, in music, in film. We've examined it from almost every angle, and yet one dimension of it remains surprisingly underexplored. Not what love feels like, not what it means, but what it actually does to a person. How it quietly reshapes the way you think and the way you design, the way you see yourself and the people around you. Because love is not a passive experience. It's not a it is an active force. And like any force, it has consequences, and not all of them are beautiful. To understand why, to understand why, it helps to start with something most people overlook. Love doesn't mean the same thing to everyone. Some people experience it as steadiness, warmth, safety, a sense that life has become more navigable. Others experience it as turbulence, emotional high and lows that are difficult to regulate, yet somehow feel more alive than anything else. And some carry a kind of quiet dread alongside their desire for it, approaching love like something valuable but unpredictable, something worth wanting but not without cost. These aren't just personality differences, they reflect something deeper. The fact that love doesn't arrive in a neutral space, it arrives inside a person, inside their history, their fears, their unresolved patterns, and what it finds there. It amplifies everything. This is the part that rarely gets discussed honestly. Love is not a solution. It is not a fixer of broken things. In a person who is grounded and self aware, love can deepen connection, sharpen purpose, and bring out a kind of steadiness they didn't know they had. But in a person carrying unexamined wounds, fear of abandonment, the need for control, a fragile sense of self, love doesn't heal any of that. It magnifies it. It gives those tendencies somewhere to go, and that is where the danger begins. Possessiveness rarely introduces itself as what it is. It begins as protectiveness, as closeness, as caring deeply about someone's well being, but gradually, almost imperceptibly, it shifts. The need to be close become the need to control. The desire to protect become the need to monitor. And the person on the receiving end of that shift, who may have once felt cherished, begins to feel confined. What looked like love from the outside has quietly become something else entirely. Obsession follows a similar path, but it turns inward. It tends to emerge in conditions of uncertainty. When someone is emotionally invested in a situation that remains unresolved, the mind, unable to find closure, returns to the subject again and again, not because it wants to, but because it cannot stop. Conversations get replayed, silences get reinterpreted, an entire interior world gets constructed around another person. A person who may be completely unaware of the weight they're carrying in someone else's mind. And most troubling aspect of obsession is how naturally it disguises itself. It calls itself devotion. It calls itself love. It borrows the language of something genuine while operating very different logic. One driven not by care for another person, but by the need to resolve one's own internal anxiety. Even in its less extreme forms, love has a way of distorting perception. When we are deeply attached to someone, we stop evaluating situations clearly. We rationalize. We extend grace that we wouldn't extend elsewhere. We hold on longer than the evidence warrants. This isn't weakness, it is the natural consequence of emotional investment. When you love someone, you are not just responding to who they are today, you are responding to every version of them. You've known every moment you've shared, the future you allowed yourself to imagine. Leaving means letting all of that go. And the way of that reality is sometimes that pure logic cannot account for. Memory makes this even more complicated because once a relationship ends, the mind does not preserve it accurately. It reconstructs it, and in doing so, it edits. The moments soften, the meaningful ones sharpen. What remains is not a faithful record of what was, but something closer to an idealized version of it. And that version can haunt a person for a long time. New relationships get measured against something that isn't entirely real. The present gets compared to a past that has been quietly beautified by time and loss. It becomes a competition nothing in reality can win. Unrequited love operates as the sharpest edge of all of this. The feeling is entirely real, but it has no place to go. In that gap, between what it felt and what is returned, people can get stuck for far longer than they realize. The logical answer, accept the reality. Redirect your investment is correct. But it misunderstands how emotional detachment actually works. It is not a decision made once. It is a slow, non-linear process of withdrawing expectation from someone you already given a great deal to. And in that process, hope tends to resurface before it has fully faded. The mind returns to the possibility, and the loop continues. And what began as love can quietly harden into something more like a trap of one's own making. Much of what people ultimately blame on love, however, comes down to something more specific. The expectation we carry into it. We expect consistency. We expect to be truly known and still chosen. We expect the feeling to last, to deepen, and to actually become safe. And when those expectations meet reality, which is always more complicated, more unpredictable, and more human than we anticipated, the disappointment is immense. Love can get blamed. Love, love gets blamed. But what actually failed was the distance between what we imagined and what was never honestly possible. The work of love is not finding the right person. It is learning to hold realistic expectations while still caring enough for any of it to matter. Most people find that balance difficult, which is why love, for most people, remains one of the most complicated experiences of their lives. So, is love dangerous? Yes, but not because it is malicious and not because something to be avoided, but because it is powerful in ways we consistently underestimate. It shapes major decisions. It influences how we see ourselves. It can keep people tethered to situation that diminishes them or push them away from one that could have sustained them. And when it shades into obsession or possessiveness, it stops being love in any meaningful sense. And it starts causing real harm to real person. And yet, the unpredictability that makes love dangerous is also perhaps what makes it significant. A love stripped of risk would lose something essential. The vulnerability, the, the uncertainty, the absence of guarantees. These are not flaws in the experience. They may be the very things that give it away. The question then is not how to make love safe, it is how to enter it with enough self knowledge to recognize it is doing to you, to understand what you bring into it, to tell the difference clearly and honestly between love that is building something and love that is slowly taking something away. That kind of awareness is something most people are taught, but it may be the one of the most important things a person can learn. If this gave you something to think about, I'd be curious what came up for I'd be curious what came up for you. Leave it in the comments. And if you want more conversations like this, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.